are some of the challenges that we have in dealing with some different generations other than our own in the workplace? What are some challenges we have?
Keeping them
Okay, communication. Okay, specifically how?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe figuring out the younger generation. Okay, good. Communication with the younger generation. Over here, someone said what?
Social media, for them to work and stay off of social media.
Oh, okay.
I have a lot of
But I am working. I'm working.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, okay. What else? What else is a challenge just with any generation?
Punctuality.
Punctuality. Who said that? Punctuality. Okay. Okay. How so? Why is that a challenge in the workplace? The punctuality. What are we seeing there?
8 o'clock means 8 o'clock, not 8:05.
Right.
Okay. Okay. But I was in the parking lot at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that doesn't count. No. Okay. In the back there. Yes, ma'am.
Different cultural differences, like work culture, personal culture, how culture affects work.
And that gets into a big, I mean, you start adding that, and that's just more layers of things to deal with. But today we're going to specifically talk about the different generations, okay? Now, every generation, we all sort of have our pluses and our minuses. So I'm not beating up on anybody here. I want y'all to recognize that. I'll send this down that way. Everybody take one until I should have enough for everybody. And take one down that way. And while that's going down, I want to remind you, this is some information that I'm going to be talking about in my, I have a women's conference. Me and a couple of ladies, marketing guru and by the name of Rachel Albertson and Takesha Bromell, who is a motivational speaker. Next Thursday, it's all day long. You've got information on it right down there at the bottom of the sheet. And this is a portion of some of the things that I will be talking about. But we talk about the different generations here. The important thing is that whether you are managing someone of a different generation than yours, or we're just simply trying to communicate with someone who's lateral to us, a colleague that is a little older or a little younger, how do we talk to them? We need to understand the communication styles are different. We need to also understand that the way they are motivated many times is different. And the way that we could express appreciation for them is going to be different. And you want to create a good work culture. You want to create a good positive environment. So appreciation is very important. Well, let's just kind of go through the list here. What you've got is you've got, according to the Census Bureau, the different ages, years, of how they separate the different generations. All right? So right now you really have 4, some might even say possibly 5, but really 4 different generations in the workplace right now. That's more than we've ever seen before in American history. We actually have 4 different generations in there. So you have what some will call the radio agers or the silent generation. These are the people who came out of the Depression and were just young, lived in through World War II. And they're called the silent generation because they don't complain really about anything. I mean, it's one of the greatest generations that we've ever seen. And then you have the baby boomers, who are 1946 to 64. After the war, everybody was feeling frisky, so let's make a bunch of babies. And then you have what I personally consider to be the greatest generation of all, Generation X, 1965 to 1980. That's my generation. And then 1981 through 1999, the millennials. And after that, there's coming in what they're currently calling Generation Z. But will Generation Z actually name themselves something else? They might. Originally, millennials were called Generation Y, just to come after X. So, but they really haven't hit the workforce that much right now. As we go through, and we'll talk about, let's go into the different aspects of each. So in the radio age of the silence, these people came out of the Depression. They were really living in the Depression. The Depression really didn't end until we got into World War II. Some people say it stopped in 1939. Not really until we were into World War II. 7 million people in America died of starvation. They couldn't find food. in the Great Depression. Is that going to be a motivator for that individual for the rest of their lives? Absolutely. So we have to start to understand what's a motivator for these people. What was life like when you were younger? And many times, not only is that a motivator, but that dictates the type of communication that we appreciate. So you look at that age, and they really appreciate face-to-face conversation, or maybe even a written note or a handwritten letter, which Laurie will talk more about here in just a little bit. It's kind of making a big, huge comeback. But they appreciate that versus email or any other sort of medium. The thing is that they come from a sense of craftsmanship. It's the old adage that if there's a job worth doing, it's worth doing what? Well, or worth doing right. Now, when I was growing up, I'd be like, why am I doing this? Is this a fruitful end? And someone my grandparents' age would say, it doesn't really matter. You just have to do it right. Okay, I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's where they're coming from. They want a big sense of job satisfaction. If you're managing someone who's in their 70s or their 80s, and they come into your organization, and whatever it is that they're going to do, instead of trying to manage, I think honestly the best thing to do is just say, why don't you just tell me what it is that you're going to do anyway, so that way I'll have a heads up, and I'll kind of know. This is their attitude. If we did it this way 50 years ago, and we did it that way 20 years ago, it should still work today, unless other people are overcomplicating things. That's kind of their mindset. And there is something to be said for that, but now with technology, it is more and more mandating that things have to be done very different than what they used to be. But that's where they come from. They have the sense of pride in their work and of craftsmanship. Baby boomers, 1946 to 64. Company loyalty. That's huge. Find a place, you find a job, you stay there for 40 years, and then you retire. That was the mindset that they had. Anything dealing with telephones, they love. Don't text them, telephones. And these people, if you call their phone and you don't leave a voicemail, they're going to be irate. Why did you not leave me a voicemail? I want my voicemail. It's like Christmas whenever they get a voicemail. A lot of times these people will have landlines. And so they love to come into the kitchen or wherever the phone is in their home, and if they see the little blinking light, ooh, they get so excited. They've got a voicemail. That's huge for them. That's their preferred way of communication. But an asset for them is consistency. They're team-oriented. Express their appreciation for their experiences, what they've been through. Many times this was the first generation that would protest the government or protest society. And a lot of times they were against the Vietnam War or maybe very adamantly for the Vietnam War. Whatever. Before that time, people didn't really gather in mass and start protesting. So they're very team-oriented, and a lot of their mindset still goes back to those days in terms of the experience, what they've been through. Generation X, it's not so much about staying with one company 40 years and then retiring, because what my generation saw is that there's no company loyalty. Not from me to them, from them to me. It just doesn't exist. It's not there. So if they get into a little bit of a financial bind, they're going to start laying people off. And that's what I saw, and that's my mentality. So what's important for me and a lot of Gen Xers is, can we climb that corporate ladder? Can we go up and make ourselves more valuable in that way? The way to manage these people is don't micromanage. We have some authority issues. Gen Xers do. So don't micromanage. What you can do is simply say, hey, look, here's what I need. I need it by Friday, 10 a.m. And leave them alone. Let them do it. Now, if they come back Friday at 10 a.m. and they don't have it done or it's not up to the right standard, then you can further into your management skills and figure out why. But don't micromanage these people. Just let them do their thing. It's the generation of being yuppies. young, upperly mobile professionals, and that's what we gravitate towards. Is there a corporate ladder somewhere where I can climb? Millennials, they all meet in secret to plot the rest of our demise. I'm kidding. But millennials, they are a unique generation. All generations are unique, but because of technology, things have really shifted more so for this generation than any other. Years ago, if I were a young man in my 20s, and I would say, hey boss, I got a great idea. The boss may say, Blaine, that's a great idea, but we tried it and what?
Failed.
It didn't work. But you get an attaboy for thinking outside the box. That's great. Now today, a millennial may say, hey boss, I got a great idea. And the boss may say, you know what, that's a great idea. We tried it, but it doesn't work. Oh, give me about 2 hours and I'll write an app so it does work. Because they have technology at their hand. And if there's something that they need, they'll find it, or they'll just code write it, or whatever. They're going to figure it out. And that's some really good inspiration that you want on your team. They love to feel like they're contributing. Project management teams. Put them on your project management teams. When in the 80s and the 90s, a project management team was a team of managers working on a project. That's what it was. You know, you didn't have a task force. You didn't say, let's get 2 people from that department, 1 person over here, and do there. And then we'll assign a chair, or even more, we'll take you 6 people, hop into a conference room, you vote on who you want to be the manager of the group. Very different than the organizational chart that I'm used to looking at. So they love to collaborate, and they want to be more involved. The problem is they are impatient. There's this delayed gratification is not a thing. They want it now. They want it now. The thing with the millennials is that we have to separate out the generation from the age, because where are the millennials right now? They're in the 20s, right? Okay. So we can look at a 20-something and we can say, oh, wow, he's still living in his mom's basement, he's kind of a mooch, you know, he doesn't do anything, slacker. And we can say, oh, well, look at those millennials, slackers. We have to separate the age from the generation, because every generation, when they were in their 20s, had their fair share of slackers. It's just that right now, the millennials are kind of there, and they can kind of get a bad rep. But they're very driven in order of wanting to contribute. Another point that I was about to make too was that in their communication style, obviously they love text. Now, Gen Xers, we love email a lot of times. If you have to manage a millennial, don't send them an email. They're not going to look at it. They're not going to look at it. So, there's something happening, and now we're the project management team is going to meet over in building B tomorrow. Okay? Don't expect them to be there. What you need to do is you need to text them, check your email. That's what you need to do. And then they'll get the message. But everything is instant, so they love text, they love the FaceTime. Going back to the fact that they are sort of impatient, which is kind of a liability for millennials, but I don't think, because everybody in their 20s, they're always impatient, but that is something I think will carry over to when they're in their 30s and their 40s, simply because my grandpa, would order something from the Sears catalog, and he would get it, 2 or 3 weeks later. Millennials now, there's a flying drone. I'm not making this up. There's a flying drone that drops stuff on their porch the next day. So it's just that I think once they get into the 30s and their 40s, it's still going to be instant gratification is what they're looking for. The world is just picking up. It's just moving that much faster. So any short, specific questions, if I have time, real quick. Okay, good. just remember that, and this is kind of a generality, everyone is different. You do need to get to know the individual, obviously. But go to understand why that generation is the way they are. Millennials right now, very social conscious, very big in the environment. And they may look at someone who's Gen X and say, why are you more concerned about the environment? And quite honestly, when I was in grade school, I did duck and cover drills because my parents were convinced I was going to die in a nuclear holocaust. Really, that's what I grew up with, the Red Scare. You know, are the Russians going to push a button now? And that was my concern. So that's my motivation versus, how's the environment? Well, trees are pretty, you know, and I just kind of move on. It's not that I don't care. It's just there's other things that motivate me that I personally find are more important. So you need to figure out who you manage and who your colleagues are and find out what's important to them. Thank you very much.